The NBA offseason can be just as dramatic as the regular season because of the numerous game-changing trades and free agent signings that can happen at any minute.
Another chance here, DiVincenzo.
We've seen how championship teams were born overnight because of a series of big offseason moves. The 2024 offseason isn't any different because it looks like teams are now stacking up in preparation for the next season. So with that, let's look at the biggest moves this offseason so far. Let's start off with the Dallas Mavericks and their roster upgrades. The Dallas Mavericks are fresh off a finals loss to the Boston Celtics, and there were a lot of key problems that needed to be addressed. On offense, they shot poorly from the three-point line and lacked the proper spacing that would have made life easier for Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who both had struggles of their own. Although they lost Derrick Jones Jr., a capable defender and streaky shooter, to the Los Angeles Clippers, the Mavs had plenty of upgrades at the wing position, which was arguably their weak point. The Mavs didn't have wings good enough to compete with elite players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But adding Quentin Grimes, Najee Marshall, and Klay Thompson changes a lot of things.
Who's hot? Klay Thompson's hot!
They traded Tim Hardaway Jr., who lost his place in the rotation, for Quentin Grimes, who's an upgrade on the defensive end and a capable three-shooter. Najee Marshall was brought in as the small forward replacement for DJJ. But the true game-changing addition is Klay Thompson, a four-time champion and a former All-Star. Though he's no longer the same old star we saw winning 4 titles in the Bay Area, Klay is coming to Dallas without the same pressure he had on his shoulders when he was a Warrior. Instead of forcing his offense with the Mavs, he can simply play off Luka and Kyrie, who are more than ready to attract defensive attention and kick the ball out to Klay. He struggled with his offense last season, but his numbers were still solid for someone who's supposed to be washed up. Despite his offensive struggles, he was still one of the top catch-and-shoot players in the league. And if his offense isn't there, he can still rely on his great defensive instincts. Klay's addition to the Mavs could be what ultimately frees up the floor for not just Luka and Kyrie, but for the athletic big men as well. And this could be more than enough to give this team a chance to get back to the finals.
Doncic comes right back and scores quickly, coast to coast.
Now, let's look at one major addition to the Pelicans roster. Since acquiring CJ McCollum, the New Orleans Pelicans have been running things with a score-first combo guard as their point guard. The lack of a true point guard hurt them because they couldn't run an offense that allowed their best players to simply pick their spots. McCollum and Brandon Ingram struggled in the playoffs against the OKC Thunder because they often had to carry the playmaking load. But the Pelicans traded DeJounte Murray for Dyson Daniels and a few extra pieces. While Daniels can be a capable playmaking guard in the future, New Orleans doesn't have the luxury of waiting for that to happen. Adding Murray allows them to have a true point guard capable of making plays and hitting clutch buckets. He can free up McCollum and Ingram, who can now both focus more on scoring. And that possible pick-and-roll combination between Murray and Zion Williamson can feed families for days. Of course, we're not forgetting about what the Knicks did during the offseason. The New York Knicks basically had a Villanova reunion a year ago when they brought in some of Jalen Brunson's old Wildcat teammates. Brunson turned into an elite player, and his chemistry with Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart were clearly there.
Back to DiVincenzo, Brunson, corner three, bang!
This team was one win away from reaching the Eastern Conference Finals, only for them to fall short because of key injuries to some of their best players. But over the offseason, the Knicks traded for Michael Bridges, arguably the second best former Villanova player in the NBA, for a haul of picks and Bojan Bogdanovic. The picks they sacrificed will probably hurt them in the future, but they're in a win-now situation, and Bridges can help. He's the league's defending Ironman champion, having played all of his games since high school. He's played more games than anyone in the NBA since 2018 and is a solid shooter, scorer, and perimeter defender. On top of that, he's already familiar with Brunson and the other Nova boys, having won the national championship with them in college. The trade for Bridges was somewhat a reactive move for the Knicks when they thought that they were losing OG Anunoby to free agency. But OG returned on a 5-year deal that gives New York more depth at the wing position, with him, Bridges, and Hart all capable of playing the wing. Anunoby brings in versatility, outside shooting, and elite defense to an already tough-minded Knicks team. Unfortunately, they lost Hartenstein in free agency. They need a solid center to complete their offseason victory, and it kinda looks like Julius Randle is now in the hot seat as a possible trade piece for a capable center. Speaking of Hartenstein, he's one of the many underrated moves by the Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder started the offseason trading Josh Giddey to the Chicago Bulls for Alex Caruso. While Giddey is a talented playmaker at 6'8", he kind of lost his place in the Thunder's offense, which focuses more on SGA being the lead playmaker. He also lacks the consistent outside shooting needed for this team to free Shea's offense. Or maybe the Thunder just didn't want anything to do with Giddey's legal problems. Adding Caruso into the mix allows them to have another great defensive guard capable of keeping in step with the likes of Doncic, Irving, and Anthony Edwards. But the most underrated move they made was signing Isaiah Hartenstein, who emerged as a capable starting center during the offseason. While he's not going to be a game-changing big man, Hartenstein showed his ability to make plays as a center while rebounding at a high rate. He's got good size and a good motor, allowing the Thunder to start him at the 5 while moving Chet Holmgren down to the 4. Chet held his own well against centers during his rookie season, but he seems to be more comfortable playing the 4.
Give it talent to just get to the bucket and hop out.
With Chet playing power forward, the Thunder can allow Jalen Williams to play his more natural position as a wing instead of as an undersized big man. Overall, Hartenstein's addition gives more size and versatility to the Thunder as this team is looking to come back strong as a championship contender next season. Now that we're on the topic of championship contenders, the Philadelphia 76ers may be strong enough to challenge the Boston Celtics. The one thing that held the Philadelphia 76ers back a season ago was Joel Embiid's health. Though he was available during the playoffs, he wasn't 100%. And the team didn't have a third player capable of picking up the scoring duties when Embiid and Tyrese Maxey were struggling. Signing Paul George changes the complexion of this team's offense. He's a great shot-creating wing, which is more than we can say about Tobias Harris, who clearly didn't have what it took to be a star in Philadelphia. PG adds wing versatility, floor spacing, and elite defense to the Sixers, alleviating a ton of pressure on Embiid's fragile joints. And with Maxey signing a big contract extension with the Sixers, this team basically has a super team of 3 all-star players capable of challenging the Celtics as long as all of them stay healthy. Speaking of health, Andre Drummond got brought in on a 2-year deal to serve as Embiid's backup big man. While he isn't anywhere close to Embiid's offensive dominance, Drummond brings in size and defense as arguably the greatest rebounder in the game. Having him come off the bench for 12 to 18 minutes will preserve Embiid's health in time for the playoffs. As long as JoJo is healthy in the postseason, anything is possible for this loaded Sixers team. Finally, we have possible game-changing moves by the San Antonio Spurs. At this point, it's clear that every move by the Spurs should be focused on freeing Victor Wembanyama's true potential because the alien could change the league in a few years. A year ago, it was a struggle for Greg Popovich to play young guards who didn't have the instincts and the passing abilities to set up open shots for the 7'4" presence in the paint. But that could change in the future. San Antonio drafted Stephon Castle, a solid freshman who had just won the national championship with the Yukon Huskies. He averaged 11.1 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 2.9 assists as a freshman, but was extremely solid in the championship game. As a 6'6" wing, he's shown talent as a scorer and defender, but it's clear that Pop wants to open up his passing abilities. The experiment with Jeremy Shohan playing point guard clearly didn't work, but Pop now has a 6'6" project who could possibly become the team's big playmaker. But the important piece of the puzzle was acquiring the veteran point guard Chris Paul, who's always been one of the best leaders in the game. He's never won a championship in his career, and joining the Spurs wasn't the best idea if he wanted to win right away. But he brings leadership, veteran presence, and mentorship to a young team that needs a good playmaker. With Paul in the mix, the Spurs can have him mentoring the young guys on what it takes to win. He could also serve as Castle's Mr. Miyagi. History also shows that CP3 has improved the winning percentage of every team he's ever played for, even if he didn't stay long with some of those teams. So, even if the Spurs will only have him on their roster for 2 seasons, he's going to change this team and bring it to new heights. And can you imagine what a pick-and-roll duo Paul and Wemby would be?